Manever I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, I see them yopo.
Well, in terms of the law, the decision has been publicly taken.
Matter finished.
Because the process leading up to the decision by the Chief Justice that no prima facie case has been established is lawful. You cannot challenge it on the basis of process or the law. It's finished.
It's finished, yeah.
What you can do now is to test the quality of the decision. But that can be done only for academic purposes, and purposes of entertainment and education. But as far as the Constitution is concerned, as far as the law is concerned, the Electoral Commissioner, Chairman of the Electoral Commission and her 2 deputies cannot be removed. And you cannot appeal against the decision of the Chief Justice. Matter is closed. You understand? And this should apply to all Article 146, processes and decisions. So the Chief Justice has decided you cannot contest him. It's the decision. The law is the law, as they say. But I have had the privilege of reading one of the petitions. And I'm still struggling with myself whether to publish it or not to publish it. And it's a 95-page petition.
Hey.
Thorough. Really thorough. This is the petition which is talking about data breaches and the dangers that the Electoral Commission through its practices subjected citizens to. I mean, very thorough, 95 pages with copious references to practices and documents and so on. And I'm wondering how anybody can decide that a petition like this is frivolous. I just cannot imagine it. One, if you read Article 146 very closely, and I'm happy that Lawyer Musa Hussein is here, at this point of the determination of whether or not there's a prima facie case, evidence is not required. This is not the period where you examine evidence or examine facts and so on. This is the period where you look at the matter before you and see whether or not what the petitioner is putting forward touches on the crimes prescribed by the Constitution. You understand? Prima facie case, on the face of the facts presented, without going into the evidence, can we now take the next step forward to look at the issues, look at evidence and so on, and determine guilt or not? So the determination of a prima facie case does not establish guilt or innocence. Okay? On the face of the facts available as presented, should we go to the next stage of calling for evidence and looking at the facts? So I am completely shocked. I'm completely shocked by the decision of the Chief Justice. But as it were, that's his decision. And the Constitution empowers him to make a final decision, and he has made a final decision. We have to live with it. The only way in which these matters may be resurrected, and I'm using my words very carefully again, may be resurrected, is if others decide to petition again. Now, if others decide to petition again, will the Chief Justice reasoning leading him to this conclusion change? I don't know. If others petition again, will the petitions come at the time when he is still Chief Justice? Or it will come at the time when he's on leave? Or when he's on retirement? I don't know. But all these are imponderables, as they say. You understand? So, yes, others can petition. But there is no provision for review. no provision for review by the Chief Justice himself or even by the bench. So matter is closed until fresh petitions come up. So this is where we are. What can we do? You see, this is the thing about democracy or bourgeois democracy. Only one person out of a population of 35 million is clothed with the authority of deciding whether or not this case should go forward. One person. And you cannot appeal against his decision. You can't do anything. Is this democracy? But that's another matter for another time. But that is what the Constitution prescribes. That when it comes to removal of electoral commissioner or judges of the superior courts and so on, only one person, one person. He may be taking the decision at the time when he has malaria. He may be taking the decision at the time when something has contributed to some imbalance in his system and so on. But his decision is final. That's what the Constitution says. And we all, 35 million people, have to abide by that decision. We have to abide by the decision, whether we like it or not. That is what the law says. Finish.
Mr. Land, would you therefore, going forward, the Constitutional Review Committee, they've submitted their report. Maybe perhaps we look at what Mr. Pratt is talking about. A need to review certain aspects, the removal of certain,
At all times, this bourgeois, limited bourgeois democratic order, at all times, we will have situations such as this one. It's unavoidable. You can't have a situation where every issue is subjected to a national referendum.
Exactly.
So there are many times when one single individual is going to decide for all of us, and we have to live with it.
But you see, that fundamental principle applies. Right now, the whole world is suffering from a certain one individual who has so much power. He can decide on the stroke of a pen that he's increased tariffs against some countries.
No, he is acting illegally.
No,
He's acting in violation of law. This one, Justice Bafuboni, has acted within the confines of the law.
Yes.
It is the law
Yes.
which validates his decision.
But in
the case of Donald Trump, the law is against the decisions that he's making.
He too is saying that a lot of those decisions, and there are many other decisions that he's taking, are within the law. So we have that fundamental challenge. But with respect to the review and all that, from the issue of, from the time petitions came against the Chief Justice and Article 146 and 14, and the various debates we have had along the way, yes, that particular item, provision in the Constitution, there has been a very loud expectation that it should be re-looked at to give more clarity, make things more, because it appears that in spite of all the provisions established in the Constitution, there's still some, because you find people having strong views on opposite sides and it hasn't solved the problem. So maybe that side of the Constitution and any other sides of the Constitution, with this review process, maybe looked at again to give us better clarity moving forward.
I'm just considering how the opposition, especially the minority in Parliament, will take this, this news in.
No, but that's their headache. Why should
Everybody is.
That's their headache.
Everybody has the right to see it anyway they like. Even in the ruling party.
We must all agree that the decision
has been made.
Has been given.
Yes.
It's not subject to review or appeal.
Yeah.
So that's the decision.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just that the decision took on those case. Yeah. She's fighting, but she's fighting a losing battle. She's fighting. Or, Charlotte say when the decision was taken, she didn't contest it. She just went because she knew that it was going to be a lost case. The only thing that I see in this decision is that it appears to me that Justice Bafubona has introduced something new. Threshold. So it will be beneficial for future conversations for him to give an indication of what he means by threshold.
He's not allowed to. He's not under any compulsion to do it.
It's practice official. I know.
Finish.
Yeah. So it's finished.
What is going to happen?
Yeah.
And I'm making this prediction boldly.
Yeah.
In the next week or two, we will see the petitions.
Oh, okay.
I have one. I have one of the petitions. I didn't have all the 10, but I've managed to get one of the petitions. So people will get the actual petitions. It will have, this is Ghana.
Yeah.
And then on the basis of the actual petitions, which we can all read, it is in English, it is not in Latin, it is not in Greek, we will read. So there will be contestations. People will be asking questions. You know, the debate will continue.
Yeah.
But no matter how the debate is shaped or continues,
It won't change.
the decision has been taken and cannot be changed.
Yes, that's
the
one.
point.
That's the point.
Finito.
Finito.
Religious bodies, not just the churches.
Well, I've read the story carried by the Daily Guide of today twice, just now. And I'm in no doubt at all that this registration is just a formal exercise of collecting data. And it's not about interfering with doctrine and doctrinal practices. I have no doubt at all about that. You know, in the mid-1980s, the PNDC under Jerry John Rawlings actually passed a law which was then known as the Religious Bodies Registration Law. And under that decree, you could not establish a church without the approval of the Ministry of Information.
Yes.
And I fought that law because it was draconian, and we believed that the intention was to regulate doctrine and belief.
Yeah.
You understand? But in this particular case, that is not the case.
Yeah.
And I read the first paragraph. The Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Ahmed Ibrahim, has announced that the government will establish a national digital registry for churches as part of efforts to streamline data collection and improve oversight of religious bodies operating in the country. That's all it is. Because even now, the churches, religious institutions go through some form of registration. Many of them are registered with the Registry of Companies as companies limited by guarantee. That's a form of registration. You understand? And under every and any circumstance, there will be some form of registration. You know, if you look at the provisions of the 1992 Constitution, which guarantees the freedom of citizens to associate for political, for social, for religious, and so on, guarantees that right. You may assume that you don't need to register any organization. But you see, if you see how society functions, for example, if you go to open an account, a bank account, some conditions, you must satisfy some conditions, which would amount to some form of registration.
Okay.
So every institution, schools register, hospitals register, you know, transport companies register, even private cars. If you have a private car, you have to say it to the GBLA. And so registration is not necessarily harmful or bad. What will become a problem if the state decides to legislate or to control doctrine.
Doctrine, yeah.
But even that one, there's a limit. You cannot establish a religious institution which believes that to gain salvation in heaven, you have to drink human blood every day. No country would allow that. No law would justify that. So to that extent, the state has a responsibility even to regulate doctrine in a certain way. The state cannot say, for example, that nobody is allowed to be a Christian, or nobody is allowed to be an atheist, or nobody is allowed to be a Muslim. So the state cannot go to that extent. But the state can decide that no religious institution can have a doctrine which says that its members have to eat human flesh in order
To gain salvation.
To be pure or to gain salvation. Okay? So that's the context within which we have to look at it. I mean, regulation, once you agree to live in a state guided by law, it means that we assert that there ought to be certain restrictions. They're not living in a free range jungle or something. They're living in a state. And the concept of the state itself means that things are governed by law. You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm reading is that there will be a digital registration which, for example, show us the number of religious institutions we have in the country. And church is used advisedly here to even cover mosque.
Yeah.
We're talking about religious institutions, not just about churches. All religious institutions.
Yeah.
So that digital registration will tell us how many apostolic churches we have, how many Pentecostal churches we have, how many mosques we have, how many synagogues we have, and so on. And their location and addresses, who their leaders are, and so on. So that in cases of necessity, they may be contacted for their own protection and their own good. There's nothing wrong with this. I don't see anything wrong with this. You know. And as Alhaji said, this is not the kind of arrangement which you say that if you want to be a Christian, you must use the King James version of the Bible. No.
Yeah.
You understand? It just simply says that yes, you belong to Jesus of Nazareth Church of Salvation.
International.
International or local. And that your church is located at
Jolo.
at this address. And your pastor is Pastor London. So that's all.
Right.
That's all. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
Right. Because I've seen concerns from some of the religious bodies who think that this might just be a surface attempt, whereas they have the real undertones,
They should go to Rwanda.
Yes. They are afraid.
In Rwanda.
Yes.
So they are afraid.
They are afraid.
In Rwanda, to actually preach in church, to establish a church, to hold yourself as a prophet or something, you need a certain minimum academic qualification.
Yes.
You have to go to school.
Yes.
You cannot wake up and call yourself a priest. In Rwanda, that's the situation there.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
But both Mr. Kwesi Pratt and Mr. London have put it in better perspective. You are in the States. The States will want to know what is happening.
Exactly.
For the protection of the pastors, the religious leaders, and for the protection of their flock.
Protection of citizens.
Generally.
Right now, we are keenly aware of what Reverend James Jones or what did
Jim Jones, yes.
Jim Jones did.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are aware of what happened in Kenya.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah.
We must be concerned.
Yeah.
We must know where the churches
Yeah.
are. We must know who their leaders are. And so on. Just in case these calamities emerge, so that we know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Look, only recently I saw a video of a pastor sitting in church, and he washes his body into a bowl, and the congregation, to gain salvation, they come and drink this dirty water that has been used to wash his dirty and stinking body. They come and drink it for salvation. Should we encourage this? And under the pretext of religious freedom and so on. Only recently there was a case in Nigeria where somebody claimed that he had found the gate to heaven. You remember that case? So people were paying thousands of naira for him to show them the gate to heaven. And so, should we encourage this? Should we encourage this practice?
Anyway, all right. So there will be some form of regulation as well, as if I'm getting what you're saying.
You can't live in a modern state
You can't.
And those who are most worried are those who have something to fear. All the established churches, they themselves, they are already so well established and so well regulated, they don't have a problem. They can even give guidance on how this thing can be done. All the big churches, all of them, it's also well regulated, so they have their own governance system, both the private charismatics and the Orthodox churches. Many of them, they've all got their system, their governance practice, all well laid out.
All right, so let's move on. Let's get to the cocoa sector. That will be our last issue for discussion this morning. And since last week, we've been talking about the crisis in the cocoa sector. But it looks like the NPP, as a new patriotic party, the opposition, wants to claim some credit. Looking at the announcement that were made at Cocoa Board concerning the cuts in salary and all those issues. Mr. Leonard.
These matters are so simple. They are not complicated at all. Anybody who has been following the cocoa sector knows that over the last 3 years, cocoa production has been reduced by 50%.
Yeah.
That's the reality. The production itself has been reduced by 50%. Why? As a result of the spread of the swollen shoot disease. As a result of the effect of galamsey. And also as a result of farmers believing that they were not getting enough from cocoa production and cutting down the trees for other crops. And so we've lost 50% of cocoa. Production of cocoa has dwindled by 50%. This is a fact. Check. Okay? Now, in addition to that, as of last year, the total indebtedness of the Cocoa Marketing Board was around close to 33 billion cedis. How can it work?
How can it work?
Cocoa road contracts have been awarded who could not be paid for. Even paying staff salary was a big headache because people had just been loaded onto the staff list without consideration for their effectiveness and so on. Just a total mess. This was the situation. The situation before Randy Abbey took power, and I am on public record to have advised him not to go to cocoa.
Yes,
I told him publicly.
Yeah, publicly.
I said, my friend, what are you going to do at Cocoa Board? The place is rotten to the core.
Yeah.
It will collapse on your head.
Yes.
Why don't you just continue working as a journalist? It's more edifying and so on. Of course, he didn't listen to my advice and he went there. Before Randy Abbey went there, we knew that it was a rotten place. You understand? And all kinds of stories have come out already. So, now, do you know something? The most interesting thing which has happened in this debate is a minority MP who actually says that, but we want this Mahama administration not to stabilize the city. You're stabilizing the city. You have consequences for exports. Can you believe this? Because the effect is that if you stabilize the city, all those who cultivate your export price will see an apparent reduction in their earnings. And I'm using the words apparent. Because the dollar value of the earnings may be the same, but the cedi value of the earnings would look smaller. Simple, commonsensical economics. The cocoa price was fixed at the time when government had pegged the dollar at 16 cedis. That was the figure they used in pegging the cocoa price, 16 cedis. Today, it is 11 cedis. So will the cocoa farmer get the same quantity of cedis he was getting?
He won't get.
He won't get. It will come down.
Meanwhile, the export price too has dropped.
Meanwhile, the export price too has dropped by about 50%. You understand? Look, I have some small advice for my friends in the New Patriotic Party. I think they should not assume that the people of Ghana are ignorant and stupid. Because if they make that assumption, it will be to their own detriment. The kinds of things they say. How? An MP actually saying that we want Mahama not to stabilize the city. So they wanted the city to fall, to continue falling. Can you believe this? Master, sometimes it's better to just stop talking. Just keep talking. You don't know what you're going to say. They can actually open their mouth and say that the city should not have been stabilized. That stabilizing the city is a sin. What?
Time is up. Let me see if I can quickly read some messages on our social media platforms. Let me do this from Facebook. It says from Edward Dubaza, I totally disagree with the CJ that there is no prima facie case against Jane Mensah and her cohorts at the Electoral Commission. We all know how Jane Mensah and co manipulated the electoral machines, in favor of the NPP. All right, so let me just go straight to WhatsApp. Good morning, my senior comrade Pratt. Just curious, are the shrines also going to be registered? I agree with minimum qualification. Can that also go for our brothers and sisters in African traditional religion? All right, so please add your names to the messages. Good morning, my senior comrade. Okay, it's the same question. From Kwablavi of Kwesi, Benghazi, says Dr. Bawumia leading NPP party into the incoming general election is a disaster for NPP. As it stands now, NPP party members are not sure of anything positive from Dr. Bawumia. Thank you for the message. Good morning, Mr. Tokuno. If a whole constituency like SAL can be denied representation by the EC for 4 years, and the CG says he cannot raise a prima facie on this matter, then I cry for Ghana democracy and human rights. Stephen from Kwabenya. Hello, Dave. The ease with which the CG, during his vetting before Parliament, stated why he gave Atai a long sentence shows how he can be inconsistent and unpredictable. Uncle Sam from Spintex.
That it is not just Iran which is not happy with the effort of the United States of America to strangulate Cuba. Indeed, if you look at resolutions passed by the UN General Assembly, virtually the whole world is against the imposition of sanctions. All these resolutions have been passed by all the countries of the world, sometimes with the exception of 2, 3, or 4 countries. So, the blockade against Cuba, which has lasted for more than 60 years, is one of the most unpopular measures in international relations taken by the U.S. administrations. So very unpopular. U.S. is in a tiny minority when it comes to justify this blockade against the Cuban people. Now, there's something which is very interesting, okay, and applies to U.S. foreign policy and how it is implemented. A government emerges which clearly is pursuing the interests of its people and so on. And the U.S. says that it is not happy. So what the U.S. does is to try to strangulate that government, usually through the imposition of sanctions and subversive activities, including assassination, destruction of critical infrastructure, and so on. You understand? And then, when these conditions, arbitrary conditions, begin to bite, the U.S. then turns around and tells the citizens that you see how you are suffering, overthrow your government, or assist us to overthrow your government. So the U.S. seeks to benefit from its recklessness, its reckless abuse of international law. You understand? And I think that it's important that we wake up to that. You see, right now as we speak, right now as we sit in this studio, the U.S. is supporting Iranian citizens to demonstrate against their government to create favorable conditions for regime change. Yeah. Why are Iranian citizens suffering? Iranian citizens are suffering because for decades, the United States of America has tried to destroy the Iranian economy. I mean, the United States of America, its intelligence services, and Israel and its intelligence services have actually gone to the extent of killing Iranian scientists, who are working on scientific efforts to resolve the concrete problems of the Iranian people in medicine, in agriculture, and so on. They killed them. They've imposed unreasonable sanctions on Iran. You understand? So they are strangulating Iran, making the people feel the pinch because the Iranian currency's value continuously goes down, so on. Prices of goods rise and all as a result of US actions. So who is to be blamed for the hardship in Iran? Is it the Iranian government or the US government? Who is to be blamed? So I think it's important that we begin to understand all of these mechanisms that imperialism, especially US imperialism, has been using in order to stimulate regime change, around the world. Now, in the case of Cuba, Cuba has suffered this blockade, extraterritorial blockade, for more than 60 years. I became very alarmed when, under President Mills, were negotiating oil deals, and we came to the point where we were discussing which vessels should carry crude oil, which had been exploited, from Ghana. And the US said no Cuban registered vessel should be allowed to carry Ghanaian oil. What is the locus of the US? How does the US decide which vessels carry Ghanaian oil? How? What is the US? Why does it have this extraterritorial power? It gets worse. Do you know that Cubans in Ghana and other countries can sometimes not open bank accounts? Cubans travel from Cuba, they come to Africa, and in African countries, they are not allowed to open bank accounts because of US sanctions. How does this make sense? I mean, unbelievable. This is the extent. Cubans are not allowed to import medicine for cancer. Medicine, they are not allowed to import medicine. This is a death sentence on Cubans. And their only crime is that they have not overthrown their popular government, which has made education free at all levels. Their only crime is that they have not been able to overthrow their government, which has ensured that medical care is available to every citizen free of charge for every type of disease. The crime that the Cubans have committed is that they committed their resources, human and material resources, to liberating Africa from colonialism and fighting against racism everywhere in the world. That's the crime the Cubans have committed. For me, I, as an African, Massa, to tell you the truth, as an African, I am embarrassed. Embarrassed by the fact that we are not breaking these US sanctions and giving open support to Cuba. Because that is what Cuba did for us. At the time when the Western countries were supporting apartheid, at the time when the Western countries were opposed to our independence and so on, Cuba committed its troops to fight against the apartheid army. And the Cuban internationalist forces defeated the apartheid army in the Battle of Quito Cuernavaca, compelling the apartheid regime to come to the negotiation table, leading to the release of Nelson Mandela from prison and eventually the overthrow of apartheid. It is Cuban internationalist soldiers who shed their blood to guarantee independence for Namibia and to guarantee independence for Angola. Today, Angola is one of the largest oil producing countries in the world. And Angola is not ready to sacrifice anything in order to supply the oil requirements of Cuba. I cannot understand it. You see, the sanctions against Cuba do not only stifle development in Cuba, they stifle development throughout the world. Because if you look at Ghana, until recently, we had 200 Cuban medical specialists working here, helping us to deal with our health problems. the sanctions against Cuba is such that we may lose that aid, from Cuba. Look, until recently, Cuba was in Ghana making sure that we work on a malaria eradication program. The sanctions against Cuba will affect that. Cuba has been developing an anti-cancer vaccine. The sanctions against Cuba would affect that and affect the world. Look at when Ebola broke out. It was the Cuban medical brigades who came to our aid, who went to Liberia, who risked their lives in order to fight Ebola. When COVID broke out, even Western countries like Italy and so on depended on Cuban assistance. So to strangle Cuba is to kill this assistance that Cuba gives, to the world. Now, those who control the levers of power in the United States of America, their main concern is that the Cuban example should be killed in the bud. Why? Because the Cuban example is a threat to their system. The Cubans are demonstrating that with little resources and correct political, ideological direction, you can do anything you want. You can develop, you can advance. Sometimes when people hear about Cuba, they think it's a huge country. It's not true. Cuba is a small island state of 11 million people. 11 million people with very limited resources. Until recently, the major resource that the Cubans had was sugarcane. Now Cuba has oil, but it's in very small quantity. The oil that Cuba has is only able to provide 50% of Cuba's own oil resources. And besides that, the oil they have is very hard. So refining it is not as easy and so on. You understand? Now, listen, you've imposed a blockade on Cuba. Mexico says, no problem, we are a neighbor of Cuba. We are all in CARICOM. We are all in the same region and so on. So we would give oil to Cuba. And then you threaten Mexico and say that if Mexico gives oil to Cuba, you would increase tariffs on the exports to the US. Then Mexico backs down. Now Mexico is trying to find a way of helping Cuba. So it says that all international airlines should go to Cuba can be refueled in Mexico. I'm waiting to see what Donald Trump would say. This is madness. 2 or 3 days ago, when the Cuban foreign minister visited Moscow, Sergei Lavrov, the Cuban foreign minister, could not mince his words. He asked Trump to get out of this foolishness. That you should get out, you should begin to apply common sense. These were the words of Lavrov. That you should begin to apply common sense. You understand? Because this is a deliberate attempt to sentence 11 million people to death by starvation. What is this? And we are tolerating this. Cuba made substantial sacrifices for us. Why are we afraid of the US? Why can't we behave like the Cubans behaved when it came to fighting for African interests and do something really positive in order to get Cubans out of this quagmire, and so on. Now, you see, I feel very sad sometimes. All of these are happening at a time when our governments have allowed the US to use our territories to carry out its subversion against our friends. What is the US Army base doing in Accra? The US Army base is gathering intelligence against its so-called enemies. Who are the so-called enemies of the US? The so-called enemies of the US are Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and so on. So if we are opposed to US, its bullying of independent countries and so on, we should get their military bases out of our soil. Because their military bases are the instruments they are using to perpetrate these wrongs all over the world. Look at how they killed Gaddafi and boasted about it. We have a responsibility to stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends, and our friends must include Cuba. in this very dire moments which have been imposed on them by imperialism.
Dedi kama amena PENDREAM TV ase. Na so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.